Hi guys, I really want to talk to you about a book that I really love that I've read just in the past, I think, couple of years. The book came out in 2017, but I only got it a couple of years ago. And unlike a lot of the books that I talked about in the High Vibe Journey, where I had to blow the dust off of it, this one comes out quite a bit lately. It's got lots of dog-eared pages, stuff written in the margins, so that's always a good sign of a book for me. It is called The Leap by Steve Taylor. Steven Taylor's the lead singer of Aerosmith, I think. Not the same guy. It has a foreword written by Eckhart Tolle, which I think, even though I didn't know who Steven Taylor was when I ordered the book, I saw that Eckhart Tolle had written the foreword, and he's a pretty big deal, so I decided to give it a shot. I think what attracted me to it was the description, so I'm going to read that to you. Well, it's called The Leap, the Psychology of Spiritual Awakening. So it says, many of us think that spiritual awakening is out of the ordinary, an extremely rare state that is practically impossible to attain unless you're prepared to become a hermit and spend decades in solitude and silence. However, after researching mystical experiences and interviewing people who claim to have had them, psychologist Steve Taylor found that spiritual awakening is far from uncommon. It doesn't just happen to Eastern sages, but to seemingly ordinary people in all walks of life. People with conventional jobs, ordinary lives, and even those with no background in spiritual traditions or practices. In this book, Taylor explores the different ways in which spiritual awakening can occur and the reasons why it occurs. He uncovers the triggers or causes of awakening, the different types of wakefulness, what happens inside a person's being or psyche when they experience awakening, how awakened people experience the world, and how their relationships, values, and goals are different. So and the difference between fraudulent spiritual teachers and the genuinely awakened. I was like, I need to read this. So I just thought it'd be really good to tell you some of my key takeaways from the book, and that way you can decide for yourself if it's like, yeah, I gotta get that, I'm gonna be reading that, or if you feel like you just got kind of enough information from my sort of highlights. So I've written down some notes here, telling myself which pages to go to, and so I'm gonna start with the foreword, because Eckhart Tolle wrote this foreword, and I'm not gonna read the whole thing, but there was just this part in here that when I just looked at it again, I had totally highlighted and written about. And it says, and I thought to myself, gosh, I read, I didn't read this before the higher program, but listen to this. Your life is not determined by what happens to you, but how you respond to what happens. Most importantly, don't add to the collective unconsciousness, which manifests particularly in the media and politics. Through your reactivity, bring the light of consciousness to every encounter, every problem, and every Facebook post. Life always gives you what you need, and right now it is giving you this book to use as a guide or companion through challenging times. And he's written more, but I just had that part underlined because I was like, he talks about challenges are the lifeblood of all evolution. Your comfort zone is not the most likely place where you're going to find spiritual awakening. Yeah, I just had all this stuff. Obstacles are put on your path as an opportunity for awakening. So yeah, totally agree with all that. This is interesting. Page 8 talks about the 3 different ways of awakening. So Steve Taylor interviewed many people who are on the awakening path or who have awakened. And so I remember there was somewhere in there about awakening and awakened. So awakening is the verb, it's the doing, it's you're beginning to awaken, or you're on an awakening journey. Awakened is like the state of being awakened. You know what I mean? It's like there's kind of a traveling, like, awakening process, and then there's awakened, like you're awakened. And actually, before I get to this part, I'm going to read about what wakefulness and awakening mean. I remember thinking it was in kind of the wrong order. The book's in the wrong order. When we use the terms such as wakefulness and awakening, It's important to understand what we're waking up from. In other words, it's important to understand the normal states of being that we transcend when we wake up. What we wake up from is essentially a state of sleep, a state of constricted, limited awareness, and of discord and suffering. This state is so familiar to us that we assume it's natural and normal and we take it for granted. And he says, but in fact, this state is pathological. It's a kind of madness, and we confuse it with sanity simply because we experience real sanity so rarely. Wow. So there's different degrees of sleep, just as there are different degrees of wakefulness. Some people are more asleep than others, just as some people are more awake than others. So if I'm talking about anything here and he's talking about sleeping, we're not talking about sleeping. We're just talking about the kind of terminology he uses where people are either asleep or they're awake, or they're, awakened. So I wanted to read that part first, and then I will go back to the 3 different ways that he studied all these people, and there seems to be 3 different ways in which a person can wake up permanently. So, one way, there are a small number of people who seem to have been born awake. Then, 2, there are those who wake up gradually over a long period of time, usually through a commitment to spiritual practice such as meditation and yoga, or through following spiritual paths or traditions or lifestyles. And then 3, this is the largest group, those who wake up suddenly and dramatically. Yeah, often following intense psychological turmoil. So I would have thought that most people would be like gradually waking up, and instead there's like these really dramatic and sudden awakenings. And he, later on in the book, he examines the aftermath of awakening and the difficulties that can sometimes occur, particularly when it does occur suddenly and dramatically. Awakening may involve a phase of spiritual crisis, or it may simply be a period of confusion. At the same time as feeling an intense sense of well-being and inner peace or fullness, the newly awakened person may be slightly puzzled by their new state, without a framework to make sense of it. If the newly awakened person doesn't understand what is happening and they aren't supported through the process, there is a danger they could be diagnosed with psychosis or schizophrenia. In fact, I believe a good number of people who are labeled as mentally ill may have undergone or be undergoing spiritual awakening. Found that really interesting. Okay, then page 14. Yeah. Okay, I loved this part. Found it super fascinating. Prehistoric humans, and later the people who became known to us as indigenous peoples, experienced the world in a very different way than most of us in the modern world. One of the main differences is that they appear to have had very little separation from the world. They felt closely connected to nature, to their land, and to the whole of Earth, to the extent that they didn't see themselves as individuals in the way that we do. Their sense of identity extended to their land and their whole community. This is a part of the reason why indigenous peoples have been so horrified by European peoples' rapturous attitude towards nature, their treatment of it as nothing more than a supply of riches and resources to be ransacked. Indigenous peoples feel a strong, empathic connection to nature, and that it's part of their own being, and so they recoil from hurting the earth in the same way as they recoil from harming themselves. The collective psychological shift that our ancestors underwent thousands of years ago, the point where humans began to fall asleep, occurred when they lost this sense of connection. A new, highly individualized sense of self developed. People began to experience themselves as egos, enclosed within their own mental space, looking out at the world. For the first time, they experienced themselves as separate from the natural world. Not beings who were living in nature as a part of it, but beings who were somehow outside of nature. So that's super interesting, isn't it? That, we think like we're evolving, but actually we took like a big fall backwards when we began to, yeah, conquer different countries and capture resources, and just started to think of like nature as just being this like commodity to be used and sold and traded and all of that. So that was where we went like that. Yeah, we became disconnected from our own being, from our essence or spirit. Our sense of identity became very constricted to a very narrow focus, our own ego. And he talks about this quite a bit in the book, more and more, so I'm just going to bring this part up. This little bit's called thought chatter. One of the strangest characteristics of our sleep state is the associated chatter, the endless streams of images, memories, anticipations, reflections, and snippets of information that usually runs through our minds when we don't occupy our attention with external things. Again, we largely take this for granted, so it's difficult for us to understand how bizarre it really is. Yeah, so we are just so used to just being in our heads, always thinking about something, past, future, figuring things out, judging, assessing, all of that. And people didn't used to live like that. And when he goes further on and starts talking about these different people that he interviews who are awakened, they talk about just not being caught in their minds anymore, that their minds just, the grasp of their thought chatter, it's just released like that. Because of the thought chatter that almost constantly runs through our minds, we spend much of our time in a state of abstraction. Rather than live in the world, we live in our minds. We perceive the world dimly and through the mist of our thought chatter and filters. Yeah, let's see if there was anything else in that part. Well, this was interesting. It's about that our sense of ego, our powerful sense of ego, and our constant thought chatter uses up a massive amount of energy. And as a result, there's little energy available for us to use through perception. As a result, the world becomes an inanimate place to us. We no longer sense the aliveness of rivers and rocks and of the earth itself. We no longer sense the sentience of trees and other plants, nor the consciousness of insects and other animals. The world becomes full of objects, which we're free to use and abuse for our own devices. We lost the awareness of a spirit force pervading the world and all the things in it. Yeah, found that super interesting. So there's a part here that I had to kind of go, it kind of comes up a couple of times here. So this group identity. In sleep, okay, we know what we mean by that. In sleep state, people have a strong need for identity and belonging. They feel a powerful impulse to belong to groups and to identify themselves as members of those groups in terms of religion, ethnicity, nationality, and any other kind of label they can find. They like to define themselves as Christians or Muslims, Croats or Serbs, English or Scottish or Welsh, Republicans or Democrats or Socialist, or even Manchester United or Los Angeles Lakers fans. Accordingly, they see themselves as distinct and different from those who belong to other groups, and are liable to fall into conflict with those groups whose interests may conflict with theirs. This need for identity and belonging is largely because of the sense of vulnerability and fragility generated by our separateness. When we feel alone with our own mental space, with an overwhelmingly vast and complex world out there on the other side, we feel threatened, and so we need some support to feel a part of something bigger than ourselves, to provide shelter and protection. Awakened individuals have little or no sense of group identity. They see distinctions of religion or ethnicity or nationality as being superficial. They see themselves as purely human beings, with no different from anybody else. And so they don't put members of their own group before others, but they treat all people equally. They don't feel any pride in their nationality or their ethnicity. They just feel connected to foreigners just as they do to their own people. Gosh, it makes me think so much of American politics. Oh gosh, UK politics as well. The whole like Brexiteers versus the Remainers, oh my goodness, that caused so much separation and polarization in the UK. And I think about, oh my goodness, in America, you know, just there's so much pride in the nationality and so much, you know, attachment to political parties. And as a result, both of these countries don't connect to foreigners. They just see people as like, they don't even see them as people. You know, if they live on the other side of the border and they want to come in, it's like they're just like, you know, yeah, it's just, okay. Let me see if there was anything else in this section that I wanted to talk about. So many interesting things. Okay, so actually I've got a lot of like pages that don't have anything dog-eared. So yeah, okay, so he goes on to interview and study awakened people to find out how it happened for them and what awakened people have in common. I mean, how do we know they're awakened? So we began to really study all of this. And I think because I identify with someone who's on a gradual awakening journey, definitely don't see myself as being born with it, and it definitely hasn't been like sudden for me. So I definitely identify with the gradual awakening. I don't know about you, but I read like my section more than I read the other sections about people who are born with it, and that it was interesting that it talks about meditation. Quieting the thought chatter gives inner peace and allows us to observe the mind without being carried away by it all. So meditation is definitely something, spending quiet time, definitely something that helps. It is likely that regularly practicing meditation will generate some degree of awakening in a person, even if they don't realize it. Yeah, many people don't consciously practice meditation because they want to move towards wakefulness. They may meditate to relieve stress and anxiety and experience calmness and mental clarity. Yeah. Okay, let's see what else. 89. Well, I only have one line underlined there, but it says Buddhism. It talks about spiritual traditions and gradual awakening. It says Buddhism has less religious or cultural baggage than any other traditions, which is presumably why it's the most popular path of awakening for secular Westerns in the modern world. Yeah, so it does seem to be a lot of people who kind of follow, you know, Buddhist ways and everything. When he studied a lot of people, a lot of them had that in common. Then I'm skipping all the way to page 184. Oh, I found this really... So now we start speaking to people who are awakened. And what are their characteristics? I loved all this. In wakefulness, perception is vivid and direct. Awakened people see the world in a very childlike way, struck by the wonder, beauty, and intricacy of phenomena that other people take for granted or just don't pay much attention to. The world is a brighter, more fascinating, and beautiful place to them. In particular, they are captivated by nature, the amazingness and beauty of the natural landscape, the sky, the sea, the strangeness, complexity, and intricacy of animals and plants and other phenomena. Yeah, in a sleep state, our powerful ego consumes massive amounts of energy, and perception becomes automatic as an energy-saving measure. Yeah, oh, I liked this. One person said how the world became sharper, more real, while the other was struck by how fresh everything seems. Another person remarked that the colors seem brighter and more alive. Others describe a sense of awe and a new appreciation for simple pleasures and activities like walking, cooking, eating, simply attending to their surroundings. Some come to relish simple things, a cup of tea, looking out the window, the sunshine on the leaves, the wonderful green of the trees. And I see that oftentimes with you guys in the Soul Explorers reflections, you know, at the end of the week, it'll be like, oh, or just putting a post in there, just saying, just the way that the light was coming through the trees, you know, I love that. You know, a sunset or anything like that. Wakefulness also brings a different perception of time, a shift in time orientation. In wakefulness, the past and future become much less important, and the present becomes correspondingly more important. So remember, Eckhart Tolle was the one who wrote The Power of Now. And we talked about that in the High Vibe Journey, now living in the present moment and noticing when our minds are ruminating over something in the past or future projecting, and just to keep bringing ourselves into that present state. And awakened people just find that they are just more and more in the present state. They spend less time out of the present state. One of the main reasons we normally spend so little time in the present is simply because we spend so much time immersed in the thought chatter. It talks a lot about the thought chatter. We never actually experience because our minds are, always somewhere else. The weaker our sense of ego becomes, the more linear time seems to fade away. It just disappears into the nowness. Yeah, lovely. Thought should be a tool that we use whenever we need it, and then set it down when we no longer need it. There are times we do need to figure things out, right? We do need to sit down and figure things out and use our thoughts for things, but we just don't need to be thinking all the time. It's just a habit. It's just something that we need to really work on. That's why meditation is such a good practice. Just practice letting go of the mind. Awakened individuals may not live in a state of complete uninterrupted bliss, but they are generally much more content than other people. One major source of this well-being is freedom from the psychological discord that plagues human beings, habitual worry about the future, feelings of negativity about the past, and a general sense of unease. Awakened people are much less prone to negative states such as boredom, loneliness, and dissatisfaction. The atmosphere of their inner world is less charged with negativity and much more harmonious. I won't read all of these. I've just so many beautiful just sentences and phrases of awakened people just talking about the peace that they feel. And in wakefulness, people are more likely to feel a sense of gratitude for their health, their freedom, loved ones, and other good things in their lives. In our sleep state, we likely take these things for granted and we fail to appreciate their true value. And then another common thing that happens when people are awakened is an absence of or decreased fear of death. They just don't fear death. There's a whole bunch on that. The awakening brings an understanding that death isn't the end. There's a whole bit about that. Yeah, okay. So let me see. What else was I gonna share with you guys? What are we up to? 23 minutes. Okay, let me just do a couple more things. Yeah, actually, almost done of the things I was going to share with you. So 2000. There's not 2011 pages here. It's my numbers thing again. Page 211. This is the chapter on being able to tell the kind of fraudsters and people who kind of claim to be awakened. So it says, if a person claims to be awakened but doesn't display all or almost all of these characteristics, then it is likely that they are either self-deluded or fraudulent. A person may claim to live in a state of union with the cosmos or in a constant state of bliss. They may claim that their mind is completely quiet and that they can set other people free with their insight. And it says, if they don't radiate compassion and live altruistically, if they seem to be wounded by slights, if they encourage a sense of group identity among their followers, or they show signs of prejudice or enmity towards other groups, then you should treat their claims with skepticism. And I was reading that, I was going, wow, because I do, you might hear me sometimes talk about what an amazing group Soul Explorers is. And I'm like, do I identify with the group? Do I in any way, I mean, I think I've got a healthy relationship to how I feel about the group. I feel it's super supportive. I do feel it's really special. I feel it is really wonderful to have like-minded people to be able to share this journey with rather than just going it alone. And the more we can see what's going on with each other, the more it reminds us and all of that. But would I be upset if somebody was in Soul Explorers and in other groups? Like, not at all. I don't feel a sense of, oh, got to be in this group. Do I think that this group is better than any other? No. Do I think, I don't have any of those don't think I do have those kind of egotistical feelings about the group. Kind of was asking myself that. I don't identify with the group as in like how I would or how I used to. I used to be a real diehard Minnesota Vikings fan, football, and Minnesota Twins baseball. And I don't at all. Anyway, I really don't feel that I identify with nationality. That's easy for me, right? Because, I haven't lived in America for a long time. I have a British passport, but I wasn't born there. I'm living in Spain now, but I don't consider myself Spanish. So I don't really consider myself, I don't have a strong feeling about what nationality I am. It doesn't really matter to me. I'm just a member of the human race. But yeah, I don't think that I feel a strong feeling about groups, but it's something that I'm exploring. You can be doing that as well. And this is the very last bit. There's this whole chapter on the collective awakening. It's the last chapter in the book. And I really am fascinated by the idea of the collective awakening. It's just too much here for me to go into now, but I just wanted to read to you how he ends the book. So he says, gradual awakening means practicing meditation and mindfulness, service and altruism. It means embracing quietness, simplicity, and inactivity so that we become comfortable within our inner space and learn to be. It means learn to quiet and disidentify with our random thought chatter so that we know the peace of inner stillness and connect with our deepest nature. It means softening the strong boundaries of the ego so that we connect with other human beings, with nature, and with the whole cosmos. It means letting go of our psychological attachments to uncover the essence that they obscure and allow our latent higher selves to emerge. And perhaps most fundamentally, gradual awakening means remolding our psyche, transforming the self-system of sleep into the self-system of wakefulness. It's not a question of pushing or striving, but rather aligning ourselves with a process that is already underway. Like allowing ourselves to float along the fast-flowing current of a river. We love that analogy. We don't need to swim, just let the river carry us. The universe wants us to wake up and will happily guide us towards wakefulness if we create the right conditions. Isn't that beautiful? Yeah, that isn't the very end, but I'm going to end it there because I just thought that was a really beautiful way to end it. So there you go. I would love to hear what you think about the highlights that I've just read out to you. Is this a book that you want to get for yourself? Do you feel like that was kind of enough information? I would really love to hear. This is like a book club of just me talking at myself at the moment. So I would love to hear whether you've got, whether you're going to read the book or whether you just have any thoughts at all about awakening, Is awakening something that you even think about? I definitely think about it. I kind of end up sprinkling it into my language a lot, the awakening journey and awakening to different concepts and awakening to, I feel like I'm definitely coming out of a sleepwalking state and into more of a state of wakefulness. Am I awakened? Oh God, no. If I read about the people who are completely awakened, have I had awakening moments? Absolutely. I think it was High Vibe Journey where I talked in week 4 about that whole experience I had. I wanted it to stay forever, you know, that feeling of just like, talked about moving through the supermarket and just like taking things without any decisions having to be made and all of that. And I do think that I haven't slid back down. You know, I think it lessened, like the dimmer switch kind of went a little bit like that. And it's probably become my new normal now to be more like that. Whereas before it just felt like, oh my goodness. So I'm probably not giving myself enough credit. I probably am more in that awakened state that I was when I described that experience, only it's become my new normal. But is my mind completely free of thought and all of that? Like, no. But I think it's good to know this information and to realize that, yeah, I definitely want to be more connected to nature, like truly connected. I do sometimes feel like it's a bit of a backdrop, and I want to return to my Native American Indian roots, and I would love to experience, like, I'd have moments of it, but I would love to experience more deeply that feeling of just oneness with nature. Yeah, it's one of my big takeaways. Okay, everyone, 31 minutes. I'm gonna end it here. We'll love to hear what you think. Lots of love.